Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Wolves. Mythology often portrays them as something to be feared, that they are killers and that they will hunt for the sport of it, not because they need a meal. Elders will tell tales of wolves hunting humans and celebrating when they make the kill, elaborating on the evil that possesses them, and this is why you never look them in the eyes. And for some, this way of thinking has expanded into generations today. If you look at any location trying to reintroduce wolves because they were hunted to localized extinction decades ago, you will find a number of people with reasons to keep wolves away. The reasons are plentiful, but often without merit. Wolves are often pointed to as being the demons in the stories, and the media loves to feed on the fear that communities feel, only expanding the problem. But the number of wolf attacks on humans is small. Truly, only a handful have occurred, and even then, most walk away with injuries, and even then, it is usually those who keep wolves as pets that find themselves face to face with the wild animal they so badly wanted to tame. Seeing a wolf in the wild is not something to be feared, except in the smallest of circumstances. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. Hello and welcome back. I am your host, Kayla. First and foremost, Michelle and Sean, welcome to Patreon. And on the note of Patreon, I don't know that I've actually mentioned this elsewhere, but I did have somebody who signed up and then canceled her membership after a few days because she really just wanted to listen to one of the episodes that I had for subscribers, which is fine. You can do that. I don't care. But because of this information, I just wanted to make sure that I say it in case I haven't said it yet, that if you are not a subscriber and there's an episode that you want to listen to, they are individually for sale on my Patreon. So you're able to purchase the specific episode without having to become a member and potentially forgetting or having to go through the hassle of signing up and then canceling. There is a 3-month delay on them though. So for example, May's episode was what just became available at the beginning of this month. And I do that because I try to give my subscribers kind of the main perks of being a subscriber. And so they get, first access to those subscriber only episodes. So there is a 3-month delay if you're willing to wait for it. If you're not, go ahead and sign up. And just as a warning before we get into this story, we are going to talk about an animal attack, of course, wolves. We do not talk extensively about the injuries because we don't really know all of them, but the details for this attack and what all they discovered just from being able to observe the attack location can be unsettling. And so I ask that if there are little ears around you, that you listen with care. Candace Berner landed in Anchorage, Alaska in August of 2009. As she took a big breath of air, a smile spread across her face. She was here. She made it. Candace had been dreaming of moving to Alaska for years, and she finally was able to do that with her dream job as a special education teacher. Growing up in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, Candace was a super active person who loved to be outdoors. She ran, she did gymnastics and lifted weights. She did some boxing, and at 4 foot 11 inches tall and 115 pounds, she was small and mighty and kind. She cared for people and children and sought to find a way to make a difference in the world, which led her down the road of becoming a special education teacher. And finally, at 32 years old, she was able to combine both her love for helping with adoration for Alaska. when she accepted a job at the Lake and Peninsula School Bureau out of Perrysville, Alaska. In this role, she would not work out of a specific school, but instead travel between the schools in the area. While here, she started a blog called The Adventures of an Alaskan Bush Teacher. This blog is still live. I just went to it the other day. So if you are wanting to check that out, you absolutely can, and you're going to see Alaska from Candace's point of view. With this blog, though, it is easy to tell that Candace enjoyed living here. She made friends and got to explore and live the life that she had been dreaming. And when school began, she was able to go to different areas in the communities and to get to these different schools, which allowed her more space to be able to explore. One of those areas was Chignik Bay, which is located almost 500 miles or 765 kilometers southwest of Anchorage, Alaska. It is located on the Alaskan Peninsula, and this is the perfect place for a small fishing village to settle. With the 2010 census having a population of 73 people, there is an emphasis on small village. The community of people had a single school for all 17 of their school-aged children, and the community is right on the banks of Anchorage Bay, which I think is also very interesting because when I looked at the map, I noticed that they have a tsunami shelter because, of course, they are in an area that would be a risk. And if you're like me, you probably didn't even consider that this is something that exists because you don't live in an area with tsunamis. In the winter, very few roads are accessible to cars, and even in the summer, the main form of transportation includes planes, ATVs, or snow machines. And even when the roads are accessible, they eventually dead end into wilderness. And this is because, as you can imagine, the winters here are hard and long. But they have a good location allowing for some less snow than further inland. Even though the winter storms drop high amounts of rain and snow, winds that sweep up from the southeast bring warmer air, which often leads to an early season snowmelt, though the winds from the west also bring frigid temperatures, and that brings the temperatures well below freezing. As usual, January, February, and March are the snowiest months. But even with the snow on the ground and freezing temperatures, wildlife thrives here. Depending on the time of year, one can expect to see snowshoe hare, moose, caribou, lynx, red fox, wolverines, bear, and wolves. The topography combined with the Chignik River salmon runs is a huge attraction to predatory animals. Bear, wolves, and wolverine can be found near the community, especially when the salmon are coming through, and in the winter when the bear are hibernating, wolves often hunt the large population of moose. Wolves, though less common and more fought in the lower 48 states, are somewhat more common above the border into Alaska and Canada. Dave Murch, who was or is a senior research scientist for the U.S. Geological Survey, studies wolves full-time and has estimated that the 2010 Alaskan wolf population was in the 7,700 to 11,200 animal range, with all of North America having between 60,000 to 70,000 wolves. With his study, he finds that, not surprisingly, wolves are generally tolerant of humans, and most of them, as long as they are not being habituated, do not approach people. They may be curious, but their curiosity is often identifying whatever this thing is and then moving on. Male wolves weigh between 85 and 115 pounds, or 38 to 52 kilograms, and females weigh less, with the average larger side being around 110 pounds, or 49 kilograms. The largest wolf on record was a male, and he was 145 pounds, or 66 kilograms. And again, they just don't want to deal with people. In the last 100 years, most attacks by wolves were due to people baiting them to come closer in campgrounds, dumps, and even out in wolves' own habitats. Surprisingly, even with the human desire to tame a wild animal, there have only been a few reported attacks on humans during this time. 24 were non-fatal, and since 2002, there have only been a few fatal attacks. Now, these statistics are purely for wild animals. The numbers look much different if you were to take a look at the captive animals, ones that are held in homes or zoos, and situations where people treat them as domestic dogs. And Chignik is definitely an area where you do not want to treat wolves like dogs. In fact, many of the residents raise an alarm when a wolf is spotted so that pets and children can be called in, though much of the time the wolves trot by on the outskirts, leaving the community alone. But on March 8th, 2010, that all changed. Candace was training for a race, and so many of her evenings were spent taking a moment to change at the end of her workday and going for a run in and around the communities she was in that day. March 8th was a Monday. It was the start of a new week, and as she was finishing up for the day, she mentioned to a coworker that she couldn't wait to get out for some fresh air. Of course, this meant going for a run. She was going to follow the road that leads to the Chignik River before turning around to return to the community. It is hard to tell how far she was running or what her plans were for that day running-wise, but what we do know is that Candace faxed her timesheet to headquarters at 10:15 p.m., and then she dressed in warm pants, a jacket, and gloves. The sun wouldn't set until 7:23 p.m., so she had plenty of time before the temperature dropped into the lows for the day, which would be around 17 degrees Fahrenheit or -8 degrees Celsius. The sky was overcast and it was windy, with winds blowing 24 to 35 miles per hour and gusts reaching up to 53 miles per hour. With the blowing snow, the visibility was reduced to only a mile, but none of this deterred her. Changing her clothes, grabbing her iPod, and putting her headphones in, she set off down the road. As she came towards the edge of town, there was a cluster of homes on the east side that she ran past. Once past these homes, the roads began to follow the terrain, creating some more switchbacks with vegetation growing along the sides of the road, making the visibility reduce even farther to about 30 to 70 feet or 9 to 21 meters ahead of her. At about 6 p.m., 4 men were heading home from Dorner Bay, and they were on snow machines as they were coming down the road. It was still full daylight, and about 2 miles from the edge of town, they came across this huge disturbance in the snow, and they could see what appeared to be blood and wolf or dog tracks. One of the men decided to check out what had caused this, and he followed the blood and finally came across a human body. Candace's body. Immediately, they got on their snow machines and booked it back to town to call authorities, and an official report was made at 7:27 p.m. That night, 3 men went out to guard Candace from the wolves returning, but 2 of them hadn't dressed appropriately, so at some point they left to go back to town to get warmer clothes. The 3rd stayed with Candace and drove his snow machine in a large circle around the site, using the light from the snow machine to illuminate the darkened edge of the woods. That is, until he saw a large wolf step out into the opening, at which point, being alone, even on a snow machine, he no longer felt like this was the safest option, and so he left to meet up with the other 2. When the 3 finally returned, they found that Candace had been moved farther down the hill, and at this point, they were given permission to remove Candace from the area as carefully as possible so that evidence could be preserved. Candace was identified by a fellow teacher, and while it seemed pretty cut and dry that this was a wolf attack, no one wanted to dismiss the potential that foul play was involved and the wolves just took advantage and were able to cover up something. Alaskan fish and game biologist Lem Butler was called in to investigate, though due to weather, he was unable to get to the location until March 11th, which was 3 days later. Luckily, Lem is an expert in this, and his investigation was extremely thorough. With confirmation from the medical examiner that Candace had died from multiple injuries due to an animal mauling, including severe damage to her throat, they also concluded that there were no other injuries that contributed to her death, which ruled out the potential for foul play. And though the medical examiner could not definitely confirm that it was a wolf that attacked Candace, this is where Lem came in. The area of the attack was littered with wolf tracks. Lem concluded that based on the facts of the paw size, the paw shape, the stride length, and the stride pattern was all different than a dog's and matched wolves', that there were no other carnivores, such as bear, that were active during this time of year. And in addition to this, wolves often go for the throat of their prey so that they can quickly incapacitate them. But what stood out to Lem the most was that Candace did not go without a fight. Her tracks that were left in the snow indicated that she was aware wolves were following her. And even with this, Lem found that this appeared to be an opportunistic predatory attack. The following is a timeline of the events that Lem determined through his investigation, and this is the point where I'm reiterating that what I'm about to say here can be disturbing to some, and so again, listen with care, especially if children are around. As Candace was running east, the wolves were heading in the opposite direction. As mentioned previously, the road was hard to see down due to wind, the foliage, and the curves in the road. The wind likely blew Candace's scent towards the wolves, meaning that they would have known that she was there before she knew about them. In fact, her footprints show that she didn't know that they were there until she was on top of them. Once she saw them, she turned around and ran in the opposite direction. And with her small stature and fleeing, the prey drive instinct took over and the wolf's gait changed from a steady trot to something a bit more purposeful and pursued. There were at least 2 wolves to begin with one following on the road and the other was just off of the road on the other side of the brush. Candace made it about 200 feet or 60 meters. And here a struggle ensued and Candace lost a glove, though she was not done yet. The steps continued, and 137 feet or 41 meters later, Candace's other glove was found, this time with the thumb torn off, which indicates that there was some sort of struggle or connection between one of the wolves and Candace. 40 feet or 12 meters later, Candace either chose to or was forced to go off of the road. And due to the depression in the snow, this indicated that she had fallen down, and there was the first bit of blood found inside this depression. Another 10 feet or 3 meters, and there was another depression with more blood, and then the trail of blood begins. The tracks on the ground at this point change drastically, indicating that for about 15 feet or 4.5 meters, Candace was crawling, and then for another 15 feet or 4.5 meters, Candace was drug. The next depression is the most telling. The amount of blood shows that this was the location of Candace's death. The depression was much larger than the others, with snow melt being about 3 feet in diameter. Candace's body, along with the wolves, was giving off enough heat to indicate that they were here for some time. There were no further signs of struggle from this point on, but still, the wolves drug Candace 83 feet or 25 meters further from the road and down a hill. This is where Candace was found.
Welcome to Murder and Mimosas.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Danica.
Are you looking for a unique twist on your true crime podcast? Join us on Murder and Mimosas, where a dynamic mom and daughter duo delve into chilling crime stories while sipping mimosas.
Each Saturday, we mix our favorite brunch drink and dive into some of the most intriguing true crime cases. Our casual yet captivating conversations blend our southern sarcasm with fresh perspective.
So pour yourself a mimosas, get cozy, and tune in as we uncover the darker side of humanity together.
Here, there is very little snow melt, showing that she was left in the first location long enough for her body to cool down. And bodies, especially when in the elements like the cold and snow, cool down pretty quickly, so this would not have taken very long. In all, this timeline could easily fit in the span of time between her leaving from work sometime after 5:10 p.m. and being found 50 minutes later. The wolves then moved her a second time after she was located to a new location about 70 more feet or 21 meters down the hill farther, and this was the location from which she was retrieved. But even though there seemed to be only 2 wolves involved in the hunting and killing of Candace, there was a total of 9 sets of wolf tracks that came within a 30-foot or 9-meter radius of Candace's body. Some of the tracks came right up to her, and others just circled the area. Lou was comfortable saying that this seemed to be a predatory attack since there was no evidence that the wolves were behaving defensively. There was no animal kill sites in the area which could have led to a defensive attack, and there was no evidence to show that the wolves were habituated to people. In response to this attack, it was deemed appropriate to exterminate the wolves in the area since they were now hunting people, which I hate, but I also understand. And I think I even agree. In total, 8 wolves were killed and examined through a necropsy. 2 were killed by Lou on March 15th. Both were in poor condition and hanging around close to the town, only about 12 miles or 20 kilometers away. There was 1 female and 1 male, and they were estimated to be in the 2 to 3 year old range. The body condition was actually labeled as emaciated, and it is suspected that their young age and not being with a pack led to their poor ability to hunt and therefore stay well fed. And while you might hear this and think that they got the culprits, the DNA collected by the 2 wolves did not conclusively match to the DNA found on Candace. On March 25th, trappers were hired and they exterminated 5 wolves, 4 females and 1 male. And then 1 wolf was shot on March 26th, with another being injured, but the injured wolf escaped and was never located. The wolf that was killed was also female. All of these wolves were of healthy body weight and had fat reserves. None of the wolves suffered from rabies, distemper, or any other condition or illness that would have made them behave more aggressively than normal. But one of the female wolves that was killed on March 25th was a large female that was actually considered overweight. This wolf had been conclusively matched through DNA to be the wolf that killed Candace. All of the other wolves were related to her, but this one was the only one that was matched through the DNA that was found on Candace. Much of the DNA samples, though, were too small to be able to duplicate and try to match to the other wolves. But no matter what way you look at this, this was the first attack on a human by wild wolves in over 50 years on U.S. soil. Most attacks that do occur are in Russia or Canada, but even those are few and far between. Wild wolves generally just don't come close to humans, and this has made it very difficult to study and understand attacks when they do occur. Residents of Chignig Lake became fearful, understandably so. With so much of their lives being outside, it is no surprise, and no one blames the community who walk their kids to school with a rifle slung over their shoulder. Even the stuffed wolf that served as the mascot at the school was taken down. The community, in its own way, grieved, much like the family of Candace did back in Pennsylvania. Though their lives will never be the same, they will never hear Candace's voice over the phone as she excitedly outlines her adventures, or how her voice swells with pride over the children she is teaching. Her family honors her in the only way they know how, and that includes releasing the negativity associated with wolves. Candace's father has been quoted saying that the wolves are a predator and that they were doing what wolves do. Their nature just happened to kill his daughter. Their grief is not overshadowed by this understanding, though there is something really powerful in being able to stay mindful of the nature of a predatory animal while in the throes of grief. No matter how small the chances are of a wolf attack, or really any attack, when it comes to wolves, it is important to remember not to run away. Get as big as you possibly can, wave your arms, yell, throw stones or other objects at the wolves, and fight back. Being alone in Alaska comes with inherent risk, especially in the very frequent remote areas. But we can mitigate these simply by having someone with us. Though solitude holds a special place in many of our hearts, and that is something that, much like life, can never be replaced. Thank you for listening. We will talk next week. Bye. What is life without close calls with disaster? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast to be the first to hear the now weekly episodes. Join our subscription on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify today and immerse yourself in the haunting beauty of the great outdoors. For around $4 a month, you'll get exclusive access to the first episode of each month and early access to all other episodes, showcasing the morbid and mysterious side of nature. Please reach out with story requests, and if you have your own story, please email tragedywithaview@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on a later episode. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.